Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Here is a very important question for you. And strangely, some consider this not as important. Are you happy? Being happy, happiness, encompasses a range of positive emotions, such as contentment, joy, well-being, and connectedness to the sense of purpose and fulfillment. It certainly is not just a momentary feeling, but a state of mind that can influence overall life satisfaction and health. Yet another question. What is happiness in truth? That brings us to the subject of positive feelings, positive emotions. Happiness is often described as having the presence of positive emotions like pride, optimism, contentment, and joy. It really is the subjective well-being. It is all about how you feel regarding your entire life, your satisfaction with your own circumstances, and your sense of meaning. Would you consider it as being beyond pleasure? As we realize, the pleasure is a component of happiness. It is also about a deeper sense of well-being and flourishing. Eudaimonia versus hedonia. The Black Dog Institute describes two aspects of happiness as follows. Hedonic, which is focused on pleasure. Eudaimonic, which emphasizes the meaningful living and purpose. Now, let's consider the psychological factors. Happiness is influenced by individuals' thinking patterns, coping mechanisms, the ability to experience and express positive emotions. Then, what are the factors influencing happiness? Social connections. Strong relationships with family and friends play a crucial role in general well-being. Meaning and purpose. Having a sense of purpose and contributing to something larger than oneself can also contribute to and promote a sense of happiness. We will have to consider also the personal circumstances. Let us not forget that factors like marital status, achievements, and financial stability can impact happiness. You might say that it boils down to positive thinking. Right. Indeed, cultivating optimism and gratitude can have a positive impact on happiness. What about the physical health? Maintaining good physical health and engaging in regular exercise can also contribute to overall and general well-being. Well said. However, tell us about the genetics. Research suggests that there may be a genetic component to happiness and how individuals experience emotions. Then the question remains, what does happiness really mean? To start, it is not the same for everyone. Kay Cherry wrote once, happiness is something that people seek to find. Yet what defines happiness can vary from one person to the next. Typically, happiness is an emotional state, characterized by feelings of joy, satisfaction, contentment, and fulfillment. The happiness has many definitions. It is often described as involving positive emotions and life satisfaction. When people talk about the true meaning of happiness, they might be talking about how they feel in the present moment, or even referring to a more general sense of how they feel about life generally. Happiness tends to be such a broadly defined term. Psychologists and other social scientists typically use the term subjective well-being instead when they talk about this emotional state. Just as it sounds, subjective well-being tends to focus on an individual's personal feelings in general and about their life in the present tense. Well, there are two key components of happiness or subjective well-being. The balance of emotions. Everyone experiences both positive and negative emotions, feelings, and moods. Happiness is generally linked to experiencing more positive feelings. Life satisfaction. This refers to how satisfied you feel with different areas of your life, including your relationships, your work, your achievements, and other things that you consider important. Another definition of happiness comes from the ancient philosopher Aristotle, who suggested that happiness is the one human desire and all other human desires exist as a way to obtain happiness. He believed that there were 4 levels of happiness, obviously. Happiness from immediate gratification, from comparison and achievement, and from making positive contributions, as well as from achieving fulfillment. Happiness could be achieved through which it involves finding a balance between deficiency and excess. And so, what are the signs of happiness? While perceptions of happiness may be different from one person to the next, there are some key signs that psychologists look for when measuring and or assessing happiness. Some key evidence of happiness include feeling like you are living the life you want, going with the flow, and a willingness to take life as it comes. Feeling that the conditions of your life are good. Enjoying positive, healthy relationships with others. Feeling that you have accomplished or will accomplish what you want in life. Feeling satisfied with your life. Feeling more positive than negative. Being open to new ideas and experiences. Practicing self-care and treating yourself with kindness and compassion. Experiencing gratitude. Feeling that you are living with a sense of meaning and purpose. Wanting to share your happiness and joy with others. One important thing to remember is that happiness is not a state of constant euphoria. Instead, happiness is a general sense of experiencing more positive emotions than the negative ones. Happy people still feel the whole range of human emotions, such as anger, frustration, boredom, loneliness, and even sadness from time to time. But even when faced with discomfort, they have an underlying sense of optimism that things will get better and they can deal with what is happening and that they will be able to feel happy again. People who may have experienced terrible traumas can still experience happiness, says Hannah Owens, though it is important to recognize that it might be more difficult for them to obtain the balance generally associated with overall happiness, and that their happiness might look very different from others who have not had to deal with such challenges. And now, types of happiness. There are many different ways of thinking about happiness. For example, the ancient Greek philosophers made a distinction between two different kinds of happiness: hedonia and eudaimonia. Hedonia. They don't need the happiness being driven from pleasure. It is most often associated with doing what feels good, self-care, fulfilling desires, experiencing enjoyment, and feeling a sense of satisfaction. Eudaimonia. This type of happiness is derived from seeking virtue and meaning. Important components of eudaimonic well-being, including feeling that your life has meaning, value, and purpose. It is associated more with fulfilling responsibilities, investing in long-term goals, concern for the welfare of other people, and living up to personal ideals. These two are more commonly known today in psychology as pleasure and meaning, respectively. More recently, psychologists have suggested the addition of the third component that relates to engagement, and these are feelings of commitment and participation in different areas of life. Research suggests that happy people tend to rank pretty high on eudaimonic life satisfaction and better than average on their hedonic life satisfaction. All of these can play an important role in overall experience of happiness, although the relative value of each can be highly subjective. Some activities may be both pleasurable and meaningful, while others might skew more one way or the other. For instance, volunteering for a cause you believe in might be more meaningful and pleasurable to you. Watching your favorite TV show, on the other hand, might rank lower in meaning and higher on pleasure. Some types of happiness that may fall under these three main categories include joy, often relatively brief feeling that is felt in the present moment. Excitement, a happy feeling that involves looking forward with something with positive anticipation. Gratitude, a positive emotion that involves being thankful and appreciative. What about pride? A feeling of satisfaction in something that you have accomplished. And optimism? This is a way of looking at life with a positive outlook. And contentment? This type of happiness involves a sense of satisfaction. And now, how to cultivate happiness? Well, some people just tend to be naturally happier. There are things that you can do to cultivate your sense of happiness. Are we talking about intrinsic goals? Achieving goals that you are intrinsically motivated to pursue, particularly ones that are focused on personal growth and community, can help boost happiness. Research suggests that pursuing these types of intrinsically motivated goals can increase happiness more than pursuing extrinsic goals like gaining money or status. Enjoy the moment. Studies have found that people tend to over-earn. They become so focused on accumulating things that they lose track of actually enjoying what they are doing. Therefore, rather than falling into the trap of mindlessly accumulating to the detriment of your own happiness, focus and practicing gratitude for the things you have and enjoying the process as you go. You may agree or not. Reframe negative thoughts. When you find yourself stuck in a pessimistic outlook or experiencing negativity, look for ways that you can reframe your thoughts in a more positive way. You see, People have a natural negativity bias or tendency to pay more attention to bad things than to good things. This can have an impact on everything from how you make decisions to how you form impressions of other people. Discounting positive, in other words, a cognitive distortion where people focus on the negative and ignore the positive, can also contribute to negative thoughts. Reframing these negative perceptions is not about ignoring the bad ones. Instead, it means trying to take a more balanced, realistic look at events. It allows you to notice patterns in your thinking and then challenge negative thoughts. Avoid social comparison. Another way to cultivate happiness and to make sure that you are able to maintain your happiness as it is being said is to stop comparing yourself to others. No two lives are alike, okay? And focusing on what others have is a surefire to feel envy and regret. Focus on the good things in your own life, and you will be more likely to find contentment in them, she says. Impact of happiness. Wow! Why is happiness so important? Happiness has been shown to predict positive outcomes in many different areas of life, including mental well-being, physical health, and overall longevity. Positive emotions increase satisfaction with life. Agreed? Happiness helps people build stronger coping skills and emotional resources. Positive emotions are linked to better health and longevity. One study found that people who experienced more positive emotions than ones that were more likely to have survived over a 13-year period. Positive feelings increase resilience. Resilience helps people manage stress and bounce back better when faced with setbacks. Just consider. One other study found that people tend to have lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol, and that these benefits tend to persist over time. People who report having a positive state of well-being are more likely to engage in healthy behaviors such as eating fruits and vegetables more often, and perhaps engaging regular physical exercise too. And so the advice is, be happy. This may help you get sick less often. Happier you are, the more your mental states are linked to increased immunity. What about valuing the wrong things, as many people seem to do these days? I know some very close by people. Money may not be able to buy happiness, but there is a research that spending money on things providing you with experiences which can make you happier than spending it on material possessions. Buy a house, buy a car, a camera, or whatever. One study would that spending money on things that the time, such as spending money on time, saving services, can increase happiness and life satisfaction. Try it. Rather than overvaluing things such as money, status, or material positions, pursuing goals that result in more free time or enjoyable experiences may have a higher happiness reward. Thinking of happiness as an end point. Happiness is not a goal that you can simply reach and be done with. It is a constant pursuit that requires continual nurturing and sustenance. One study found that people who tend to value happiness most also tend to feel the least satisfied with their lives. Consider, essentially happiness becomes such a lofty goal that it becomes virtually unattainable. And so, valuing happiness could be self-defeating, because the more people value happiness, the more likely they will feel disappointed, suggest the authors of this study. Perhaps the lesson to be learned is to not make something as broadly defined as happiness as your goal. Instead, focus on building and cultivating this sort of life and relationships that bring fulfillment and satisfaction to your life. When we look at Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, we discover that there have been 2 publications concerning happiness. They are both philosophical literatures, but both of them describe happiness slightly differently. In one, happiness is used as a value term, being synonymous with well-being or flourishing, and the other uses the word as a purely descriptive psychological term, being not so important project in the philosophy of happiness. One discovers is being simply getting clear on what various writers are speaking about. What are the important meanings of the term happiness? And how do they connect? That's a good question. The well-being is a sense of happiness which receives significant amounts of attention in the contemporary literature, whereas the psychological notion undergoes a revival as a major focus of philosophical inquiry following the developments in the science of happiness, the main account of happiness being, in the sense, considered as being hedonism. It is the life satisfaction theory, and perhaps the emotional state of being happy in the philosophical sense has always been an important concern for the philosophers. Yet the meaning of happiness for a good life has been disputed in recent decades. There are more questions of contemporary interest concerning the relationships or relations between the philosophy and the science of happiness. The meanings of happiness. Senses of happiness. When we ask the question, what is happiness? The answer of the meaning of this question becomes unclear as to what is being asked. What does really the word happiness mean? In this case, as it is written in the inquiry, it becomes a linguistic issue. But what is the happiness in reality? Is it pleasure, a life of prosperity, or something else? You see, philosophers who write about happiness take their subject matter to be either of two things, each corresponding to a different sense of the term. 1. State of mind. 2. Life that goes well for the person leading it. Just as the inquiry about pleasure or depression concerns the questions of psychology, inquiring about happiness, and in a sense, we can call it a long-term psychological issue. It is fundamentally the study of certain mental states. What this state of mind is, and which we can consider as happiness. Question. Typical answers to this would be like life satisfaction, pleasure, or positive emotional conditioning. A further question arises. How valuable is this mental state? Happiness in this sense is just a psychological term. One could intelligently say that happiness is not valuable at all. Perhaps we are a high-achieving intellectuals who think that only ignoramus can be happy. In this sort of view, happy people are to be pitied and not envied. In the second case, the subject matter is a kind of value. And what a philosopher these days tends to call it prudential value, or more commonly, well-being, welfare, utility, or flourishing. Happiness in this sense concerns what benefits a person receives, what is good for them, and what makes them better off, serves their interest, or is desirable for them for their sake. Being good for someone is different from simply being just good. Perhaps it is always good for you to be honest, yet it may not always be good for you, as when it entails self-sacrifice. The word happiness is derived from the term for a good fortune, or just good. And indeed, the term is used to translate in other languages, often have similar roots. In this sense, call it the well-being. Happiness refers to a life of well-being and flourishing, a life that goes well for you. Theories of well-being, and hence of happiness, in the sense of well-being, come in three basic flavors, according to the best-known taxonomy: hedonism, desire, and objectivist theories, whereas identifying well-being roughly with experiences or pleasure and desire, and theorists equate it with the satisfaction of one's desires, actually getting what you want, versus merely having certain experiences. Now, both hedonism and desire theories are, in some subjectivist viewpoint, is the ground for well-being in the individual subjective states. Objective theorists think something that benefits us independently of our attitudes or feelings, remembering that there are objective potentials. The best known example, take that well-being to consist in a life of virtuous activity, or more broadly, the fulfillment of our human capacities. We can easily clarify our inquiry. Perhaps you simply want to know about the nature of a certain state of mind. Happiness in the psychological sense. In this case, some sort of psychological inquiry will be needed, either on philosophical or scientific grounds that it might be claimed that happiness is dependent on being with good friends. This is not a view about the nature of definition of happiness, but rather theory about the sort of things that tend to make us happy. Alas, it leaves unanswered or takes for granted the question of just what happiness is as such that the friends remain a good source of it. Let's consider some theories on happiness. Philosophers have commonly distinguished two accounts of happiness and the life satisfaction theory. Head-on lists identify happiness with the individual's balance of pleasant over unpleasant experience. The difference is that the head-on list about happiness need not accept the stronger doctrine or welfare hedonism. This emerges clearly in arguments against the classical utilitarian focus and happiness as the aim of social choice. These arguments tend to grant the identification of happiness with pleasure, however, challenging the idea that this should be our primary or sole concern, and often as well the idea that happiness is all that matters for well-being. Well, life satisfaction theories identify happiness with having a favorable attitude toward one's life as a whole. This basic theme can be filled out in a variety of ways, but typically involves some sort of global judgment and endorsement or information of one's life as a whole. This judgment may be more or less explicit. It may also involve or accompany some aggregate of judgments about particular items in one's life. And the third theory, the emotional state view, depart from hedonism in a different way. Instead of identifying happiness with pleasant experience, it identifies happiness with an agent's emotional condition as a whole. That's emotional well-being. This includes non-experiential aspects of emotions and moods and excludes pleasures that don't directly involve the individual's emotional state happiness. On such a view is more nearly the opposite of depression or anxiety, a broad psychological condition, whereas hedonistic happiness is simply opposed to unpleasantness. A fourth family of views, or hybrid theories, attempts an ironic solution to the diverse intuition about happiness. Identify happiness with both life satisfaction and pleasure or emotional state, perhaps along with other states such as domain satisfaction. The chief appeal of hybrid theories is their inclusiveness. All the components of subjective well-being seem important, and there is probably no component of subjective well-being that does not at times get included in happiness in ordinary usage. The common practice of measuring happiness simply by asking people to speak of explicitly how happy they are is sometimes defended on the grounds that it lets people decide for themselves what happens as is. The point might be literally to leave it up to the respondent to decide whether happy means he does not state, emotional state, life satisfaction, or something else. Thus, one respondent I'm happy might mean my experience is generally pleasant, while others might mean I'm satisfied with my life as a whole. It is not clear that asking ambiguous questions of this sort is a useful enterprise, since different respondents will in effect be answering different questions. The researchers should decide in advance what they want to measure: made life satisfaction, emotional state, or something else, and then ask questions that refer unambiguously to those states. We focus on subjective well-being here and the studies thereof, since that work is standardly deemed happiness research. But psychological research and well-being can take other forms, notably in the eudaimonic, in hedonic. Empirical discoveries tell us 1. First, people are happy. 2. People adapt to most changes, tending to return over time to their happiness set. 3. People are prone to make serious mistakes in assessing and pursuing happiness. 4. Material prosperity has a surprisingly modest impact on happiness. Happiness, in short, is believed by most philosophers to be insufficient for well-being, and still less important for a good life. These points may seem to vitiate any substantial role for happiness in ethical thought. Well-being itself is still regarded as a central concept in ethical thought, and there are reasons for thinking happiness being important, both practically and theoretically. Even if happiness does not suffice for well-being, a point that not all philosophers would accept, it might still rate a privileged spot in the theories of well-being. This could happen in either two ways. First, happiness could be a major component or theory of well-being. The idea is that well-being involves being happy, where one's happiness is a response or one's own autonomous to a life that genuinely is one's own informed one. The authenticity constraint is meant to address both experiences, machine type of worries and happy slave objections relating to adaptation, where happiness may be non-autonomous, depending on manipulation or the unreal acceptance of operative values. Happiness could be the central or even exhaustive of one of those values. It was suggested that welfare hedonism could be correct as a theory of how well a person is doing, but not of how well a person's life is going, which should perhaps be regarded as a distinct value. Happiness mode then should suffice for well-being, but only in the narrow sense. Many have made similar points, but uptake has been limited, perhaps because distinguishing multiple concepts of prudential value makes the already difficult job of giving a theory of well-being much harder concentration as it is observed. Most of the popular literature on happiness discusses how to make oneself happier, with little attention given to whether this is an appropriate goal or how various means of pursuing happiness measure up from an ethical standpoint. More broadly, how, if at all, works. Should one convince happiness as part of a good life? The individual's pursuit of happiness may be subject to non-moral norms as well, prudence being the most obvious among them. Anyway, enough to confuse you. We'll meet you again by the next episode, and thank you for watching and sharing. Until then, be happy, smile, and thank you.